Good morning, and good morning. Okay, I'm cold. I'm cold this morning, and it's supposed to be warm outside later, but currently in my house it's cold. So I just turned on the heat, and I'm a little cheap. So I just turned on the heat. So I'm getting a little heat up in here, but where upstairs in my upstairs area it's warmer. But I come downstairs to do my presentations, my vlogs, and so I feel the difference. But anyway, hope you had a good couple of days. I have. I have. I'm doing well. Busy, just so busy with different trying to meet different uh, requests and requirements of folks, and it's working all right, but at night I am tired, so I do get my rest. And it had laid on my heart, that we needed, to do something coming up for the MLK parade, and our Rotary Club, which is a part of the combined Rotary clubs, the Panhandle, that they needed volunteers. And the whole idea of the parade and the day is that it would be a day of work and not a day off. And so come Monday, I will be one of the marshals, the parade marshals. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've done it before. So they'll tell me where I need to be here or there. I'm going to do it, and make sure that I certainly represent the fact that, if it wasn't for some of the sacrifices of, you know, our forefathers, where would we be today? Just in terms of being a more progressive and a more um, understanding society, even though we've had some pushback. We have to talk about the fact that sometimes things happen that are out of our control. But then I thought about the Martin Luther Kings and all the others that certainly went out there and gave their, not only their opinion but the possibility of loss of life, just to say that one day that those children, which are us and our children and those beyond us, would have rights that they didn't have at that time. And so I just think that was a great maneuver, because maneuvers change things. They make, sometimes they don't change them for the good. Sometimes the maneuvers may work in you know someone's back alley, but the maneuver um sometimes changes and makes it where it just works well for those who are looking after not just themselves but others. So that's our word today, maneuver. Um, and going into my little goodie bag, I had to find a poem that I thought would be, kind of significant to start this off. And, you know, even when you talk about the 1960s and the 60s for us, many of you or your children may not even have been alive at that point. Even me, I was young, and so I thought about, wow, so, and sometimes, even when I used to talk to my parents, and I always used to say, well, what was it like to have been raised in the South? And I was raised in New York, so I knew nothing about the South. My oldest brothers and sisters did. And when it was that decided that we would be living in the South, they were like, we ain't coming. And some of them never did. Before they passed away, they never came south again once they got out and under what they thought was to be oppressive lifestyle, and a segregated, inopportunities, just the fact that they could not eat at the same restaurants and drink from the same water fountains, those kinds of things. I didn't know anything about it, so I was like, wow, I never heard of that. But they would try to tell me little bits, and I think I got more involved in it and more of an understanding of it when I went away to college, and there were other things going on that brought your attention to the fact that every once in a while we come across obstacles in our lives that require a maneuver, that is a stance, and that will say, there needs to be change. And the change can't just be with me as the one. It has to be with more than one, and it has to be a multitude, and it has to be a movement, and those things happen. So this morning I found this poem called "To Do." It says, "To do this right is the objective." How many of us get up every day with intention to do things right? Doesn't mean that we always will. Doesn't mean that we will ever be perfect at anything that we do, because we are not perfect people. So we will think we're going to get something done and we don't. We will say we're going to do something and we can't do it. We're going to be someplace and we don't make it. Those are who we are. Those are the what I would call the flawness of it. The flawness of us. We're flawed, So therefore, we're going to make missteps. But when I think about how someone's idea of making a change meant that they would go out with the possibility of losing their life, their limbs, their liberty, even though it might have been limited for them at the time, which is what they were fighting for, that's a phenomenal feat to me. That's wonderful. So anyway, this poem is by Lawrence S. Pertiller, P-E-R-T, kind of like a hard Pertiller, or Pertiller. You run it together, Pertiller. But anyway, it's Pertillar, Pertiller. And it says, "To do this right is the objective." I like the poem. It says, "Inside of this vehicle I am, fueled to allow me to drive. To maneuver through obstacles experienced, we have come to accept and call life. And to do this right is the objective, although blinded perceptions may bring regretful limitations to obscure what is envisioned. Continuing until it is finished, we keep a faith and entitled that bravery, hoping to make less mistakes, no matter what it takes to initially face them." That's a heavy little poem, to think that we know we're not perfect, but we will try. We make attempts and we will fail, or we will just continue to live. And sometimes they said in regret for what we've seen, what we've envisioned. But the possibility is that we will just still work at it to be as conscious and related and attached to the things we believe in as possible. That's what it says we have to do. It says hoping to make less mistakes. That's us. What I made yesterday as a mistake, and I know it now to be a mistake, I'm not going to make that mistake again, or at least every attempt not to. So it says no matter what it takes, initially face them. No matter what it takes. Sometimes it takes more than we thought we could give, and we do it. And then sometimes it takes more than we give, and we don't give. We just don't. We don't. So what is a maneuver? A maneuver is one of those things that talks about a movement. It is a movement, a series of moves requiring skills and care. And sometimes we don't care about how we move forward. We're just interested in moving. And I know you can see it in so many areas of the country, of things that have changed over time, not just for the one or twos, but for the multitude of people, for the many people, things have changed. Just to see that if you stay long enough, you may see the change that you're looking for. Okay. But if you're also the one who's not only the naysayer, but the one that's sitting in the dark and not interested in seeing change, then you may not see the change even when it comes. It is what it is. So the movement and it talks about it being the operational process that goes on. What is exercise? What makes a move? the activity involved or activities. Because sometimes when you're talking about making a move or a movement, you got to be moving. You got to be moving. It says there's activity and there's action. There's many of us who say that we move every day, and we probably, if we were had on a watch that was calculating how many steps we really took, we didn't take very many, or we didn't take as much as we should have. I had I don't know what I did with my charger for my watch, and I misplaced it in the house around Christmas time. I had gone and done something, and for our, I think we went away in November for our church, and I don't know, somehow or another, boop, it's in here. So I have to find it because it kept track of my steps. I like knowing my steps, my phone to track them, but I have to have my phone on me, and a lot of times I put my phone down. Don't we all? Then our maneuvers are running around looking for it. But anyway, when we talk about maneuvers, we're talking about what movements are we making towards whatever the change we're trying to do or not do. We may be the people sitting there saying it will not happen. We will not do that. I'll ask you this morning, do you occasionally get stuck? Are you stuck? I do. I get stuck. I get stuck on deciding if I'm going to join something, not join something. I try to examine what are all the elements of joining. What is required of me. Who's the mouthpiece. Who's the person that documents what's really taking place. Who's the person that's the visionary or the person that is taking the photos. This is what we're seeing. And sometimes if you don't have those things in place, the maneuvering goes off track. Even in our own lives, we know that occasionally we go off track. We just get lost. We get lost. So when I start off with my word, my M for in maneuver is for movement. It says movement as in the shifting, I like that word, of the act or an instance of changing positions. I think, the year right now that we're in will come up where we have an election, and people's opinions will have shifted from what they were before to what they are now. They will shift. Or they may have been more fixated on staying where they were and not moving. Okay, so there is no shift in them, but the movement that they may be a part of may be very strong, and therefore leading them to stay where they are in terms of their opinion and their desire and their requests and their wants. So movement, as in the shifting act, is the instance of changing positions, or here's the or it's a group of people who share the same beliefs, ideas, or aims. Isn't that political? The same beliefs, the ideas, and aims. And this is in, sometimes people won't tell you, like, I'll be honest, I'm not a person that's big on talking about politics, weight, or religion. Okay. Because to me, those are very, sometimes obtrusive things. So you want to leave people standing and wherever they want to stand. You don't have to make them move. You don't have to know their business. Not necessary, because they're personal. Those are personal, things that they like, things that they may love, things that they're involved in. They have their own attributes associated with what they want to associate with. Same thing with me. I like red lipstick. Do I like it all the time? No, I don't. But once again, somebody else may say, hey, where you get that lipstick from? I may have to tell them, but that's if they ask me. Or if I can't find it anymore, I tell them, hey, it used to be, I bought up a whole bunch of them. I don't know where to buy it anymore. Good morning, Maurice. How are you doing, my friend? Good to see you in the space. Today, our word is maneuver, and it's a good word. But maneuver, like the first word we're dealing with, is my movement. And it says movement talks about the shifting. There, that word is again, the shifting, the move, the migration. I always talked about, and remember the great migration after World War II. Many of the people who had dealt with so many things of unkindness and basically discrimination in the South, there was a great migration to the North. So people went to Chicago, they went to Michigan, they went to Chicago, Illinois, they went to Michigan, mostly Detroit, or Flint, those kind of areas, and then they went to New York, in the city, and of course above the city. But they went. My parents were certainly a part of that. So we lived in. Hey, good morning, Tammy. Happy birthday, girl. Um, we went to the North, and so we those brothers and sisters of mine who were older knew about the South and didn't like it. So once that their parents moved to the North, that's where they stayed, never to leave again. Whereas I was born in a later time, and I was born in New York, raised in New York. I knew nothing about the South. So they were like, we can't even believe that. How could it be that you would be down there living? They didn't give it a chance. They always thought that their memories would always outweigh anything that they thought they could go through again. They refused. They refused, you know. So for them, movement north was a positive thing, as it was for my parents and many others who came from the South and were part of that great migration. So the migration really spoke to their beliefs, their reasonableness to talk about being mobile, their relocation, and their motion. You know, and I don't know if you ever read the book Driving While Black. Well, Driving While Black really carried on the idea of what that movement went, what that maneuver took, and what it brought it back. What came back with it is that as people went to the North and did well or did much better, and they, because it was hard for them to get on in the rail system or buses and those kinds of things, as we know the stories of Rosa Parks and others. So they ultimately went up there, worked hard, and bought a car. So when they returned to the South, they didn't return to stay. They returned to be a part of the opportunity to see their family, but have their family also see them doing much better living in the North. So those things happened. So the movement is that relocation process, the motion that takes place, the migration that may occur. All that happened with the Great Migration. And then we move on to the A of maneuver. My A for maneuver is alteration. Alteration, the action or process of altering or being altered. Sometimes we have to be altered to fit in better, not just for others, but for ourselves. We have to be altered. It may be that we have to learn something else, or we might have to go someplace else. We may have to request something else. Sometimes our altering may require us to stand up, to be a part of the vocal, ness of need, of want, of desire. So it says that when we're looking at alterations, we're looking at change. How do we sometimes need to change? Sometimes we need to change. What adjustments must be made? What do we have to do? Hey, good morning, Presley Jones Book. How are you? Thank you for coming in this morning. Today, our word is maneuver. We're looking at what maneuvering does. And we talked about the fact that there was at one time a great migration from the South of the United States to the North. And that was with, just the realization that the South had some things and restrictions that were too harsh for the people that were there. So they really needed to change it. They needed to change things for themselves. So their alteration for them was the process of realizing that they need to do some adaptation, some modification, some conversion, some revisioning, some reshaping of themselves and remodeling. And sometimes when we're doing all of those, adapting, modifying, remodeling, reshaping, we need to move. We need to go. We need to make a change for ourselves that ultimately will change us going forward. Sometimes change is difficult. We have trouble doing it. We don't do it well. Okay. But others, no big deal. They would change friendships, they would change churches, they would change families, divorce one, find another one. They'll change. For them, it's very easy. So to be altered really says that the person is willing to go through something, whatever that alteration is. Then we look at in the word maneuver, what's the N? My N is navigation. Sometimes we have to navigate where we are to realize that either we cannot stay here and we have to plan the navigation for where we're going to. Plain and simple, real easy. It says it's the process or activity of accurately ascertaining one's position and planning and following a route. Meaning, if I know that I can't stay here and I need to go someplace else, I got to plan a way to get out. I have to, I was old school trained, to read a map. And I remember, we didn't have Google Maps, MapQuest. We didn't have any of that they have now, which is wonderful. But when I first learned how to drive, and I think when I would maneuver New York, and everybody would say, how you learn this like this? My family would just say, you know what, if you want to do it, learn it. Wasn't necessarily meaning that they were going to teach it, because my mother didn't know how to drive. And by the time I was driving, I learned how to drive. My father had already passed away. But I learned, I took lessons and I learned how to drive. But I also learned how to maneuver a map. And I said, listen, if I want to go from here to here, how am I going to get this? And how can I do it in less time? What's the smartest route? That's navigation. That's what we do in our lives. We navigate where we are and where we need to get to every single day. Even if we don't want to call it navigation, we do every time we get in our car and we need to get to work. But if the path that we generally are on, okay, that's we'll call it the standard route. It ends up with an accident, okay, and they close the road down. You got to maneuver. You have to find a navigational process that's going to work for you, that's still going to get you to work. You may be a little late because it may be a longer route. Nonetheless, you figured it out. So the navigation talks about, finding another route, following a route, or it says those navigating life acknowledge that the world is reflecting their current state of reality. That's another shift, but still on navigation. How sometimes we have to realize that we have to go in a different way just to stay on track, on course. For us, it says it's the change within and without follows. Change within and without follows. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at can change. Is a well-known spiritual saying which proclaims our capacity to be conscious creators of our life circumstances. Wow, that's a mouthful. The fact that sometimes we realize that we need to change our friends. We may need to even change our location. We may need to change what we do for a form of relaxation. Maybe too much libation. Maybe some of us is toting a little bit too much. We're getting it done, and maybe wrongly, but nonetheless, we might be doing some things. It also talks about that this navigation may be our Hellman shop. or it could be a steersmanship. It could be the channelized, how we go down one way. We know which way to go. That's the way we go. And maybe the handle that we have, or the maneuver that we take, or the point that we make, the steer that we're headed for, the direct in our course, the direction we take in our course, and how determined we are to get there. All those things speak to, the fact that sometimes we have to do navigation of our lives, just like we do navigation on the road, making sure that, that we can't occupy the same space another car is already in, meaning we have to try to maneuver around other cars to make sure that we get to our destinations safely. When we move on in the word and we move on to the E for me is exercise. How do I exercise my right to be who I am? How do I do it? When I think about, my forefathers and foremothers, I don't know. I know at one point when I go back in our history, there was indenturedness and enslavement, but if you ever saw my grandmother sitting next to me, my grandmother looked like, a Caucasian woman. And then occasionally she would take her hair down and we get all freaked out. Talking about who's the white woman in the kitchen. My mother said, if y'all don't get up out of my face, I'm gonna beat you down. But we didn't know. We didn't know that but after she came to live with us, then we understood the fact that things were different for people that didn't necessarily look like us, but were related to us, had some features, but not all of our features. So, you just knew that life had taken on its own maneuvering, and it had appeared in terms of how their lives were exercised. And it says, if you exercise something such as your authority, or your rights, or your good quality, or the use of how you put things into effect, that's what you exercise. That's the real deal of exercise. That's how it fits in this. It says you're carrying it out, you're conducting it. There's a directness to it that you're connected to. It's where at sometimes you may feel dictatorial, meaning this is what I say, this is what I want, this is the only thing I want. This is the only thing I stand for. Okay. And sometimes with being exercised, there's a guide to how it's done, when it's done, who's doing it, how many are a part of it. Sometimes we don't get into the devil or the details of the devil's desire to have us exercise. It says then there's the management of things, how things are there's oversight. How is it oversighted? Who's supervising this process of this newfound area that we're going to exercise? Maybe it's a right to do something, a right to be somebody, all of that. And then it says exercise also talks about what is regulated. How do we regulate what it is that we are exercising our right to do? I have some friends that you come into their house, your shoes come off, period. They don't care. The house is set up, and they give you little, throwaway little socks. They don't even have the ones that go over the shoes. They want the shoes off completely, and I would always marvel at the fact that how beautiful their house stayed, Well, I'm not that disciplined. I should be, because I'm right by an area that has a lot of dust that comes up every day. And so I'm constantly trying to wipe up the foyer and the floors leading around the house. So it does have its requirement of tending to. My next letter in my word of maneuver is my U. My U is unrest. I've lived long enough to see unrest. I think we've seen it. Even January 6th would have been a period of unrest on our TVs, where we got to see that people were unhappy. And And they thought that there needed to be a shift in the government, a movement that exercised rights um, of of concern for a group of people. But then you can take it back through further in our histories, and we will find that they've always had periods of unrest, and the unrest is always when someone has fallen or is feeling that they've fallen below what they deserve. There's something else that's missing. Something else needs to be given or received, and they feel that they've been omitted from that. So the unrest, it talks about a state of dissatisfaction. It's a time of disturbance, of agitation in the group of people, and it says, or it's a disturbance and dissatisfaction in a person. So it's not just with a large group of people or the government or the agency or the school. It's down to the person. Sometimes we have unrest because we've associated with something that took a turn away from what we now believe to be wrong, or we didn't know all the details when we joined. See, sometimes as they say, that's so true. Sometimes the devil in the details would get you in trouble because you didn't go down all of them and make sure that you understood everything. So the unrest is when you feel that and see disruption, a disturbance, a period of being upset, the trouble that it brings to the surface, the turmoil that occurs, the decor that you are able to witness, the uproar. When I see things that just they might be burning things or using foul language or aggression or where there's bullets or fighting in the streets. Those things are certainly periods of unrest that you can actually see them. And social media is showing it, and it's on the television, it's in your news feeds, on the screen and everything. And it's also in, sometimes it's just conversation where people say, did you hear what happened? There it is. It presents itself often. And it talks about it just being the unrest talks about the dissent that it, reveals. And let's face it, that's our lives sometimes, where there are and has been things that have gone on that we have no control over. None. Used up. Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Deb. Good morning. And sometimes we are used up. Yes, we are. We're used up for the sole purpose that we're tired. We're tired of the things that we face. And it could be anybody because, obviously sometimes what we face as one may be, once it's released to others, that the realization is that it's really available to all to feel the same way. And those who do are the ones sometimes, especially if it's gotten to the point where it's raised some hairs and a lot of interest moves out into the streets, then that's what you know. That's what you understand that occurs with the unrest. The visibleness, that's my V, visible. To me, when you are doing a maneuver and it's a major maneuver, especially if it's with others and it's large, that's called a visible maneuver. It's able to be seen. It says it's clear. It is discernible. It says it might offer some suspiciousness. It's evident. It is noticeable. It is obvious. When you think about things that you've seen that have been visible, it's like, wow, wow. Riots. I remember them rioting in New York. And, I remember my dad saying, you can't go downtown. Don't go. I just remember. And I was a teenager, but I wasn't old enough to be out there anyway. But those that were older than me, like my older brothers and sisters, they were down there. But but the younger kids were not. But just to see those things says, wow, we have really come a long way from that, a long way. But I just remember the fear it planted in me. I remember that. I remember that what I was seeing on television and what I was, hearing in terms of discussion, there was fear everywhere because, anytime you have unrest, it's visible like that, to be, it to be noticeable and very obvious that more that maybe hasn't happened yet could happen. So it makes it very fearful for folks, even not just the young, but even the elderly and those that are even of the same age that might be doing it. It just says, wow, what happened? What happened to make it like this? When we move on in our word of maneuver, I have my E is educate. Sometimes, we need to be educators of the information that we have where it can be passed along. To me, a child just doesn't learn in school. The child also learns outside of school. The teacher only has your child for 6-7 hours a day. You have your child the rest of those hours. Okay, 18 hours, whatever. There you go. It's your job to educate your children. I used to teach my child all kinds of what I would call now. Some of it was superfluous information, not necessary but fun. Oh, I would teach her bulbous. I remember teaching her about the word bulbous. And so I said, oh, you have a bulbous toe. And she said, oh, what's bulbous? She went and told her teacher that her mom taught her bulbous. There you go. I mean, to me, make it fun, but don't shy away from educating yourself and others on what it is that they need to know, and then other things that you don't mind sharing that they can know, like the fun stuff. But educates is give intellectual, moral, and social instruction to someone, especially a child. So they're calling it out. This is according to the dictionary. Okay, I didn't make this up. It says typically at school settings or universities, but also it could be in the home, could be at churches, it could be at aftercare locations. The idea is that teaching is important. Passing on information is important. It talks about it being in school, the instruct that carries on, the fact that sometimes tutoring is necessary, the drill, making sure that they would drill. I used to drill my daughter all the time. She hated it. But I feel that it helps with vocabulary, and it helps you be able to look at the reasonableness of needing to have comprehension. You ask it again, you tell them, you teach them, then you ask it again. And I used to do it in intervals where I think she forgot all about that word earlier in the evening. I come back and ask her, and what is that? She'd tell me. So also, you not just teach, you train, you prime. To me, I always looked at what prime was, and prime basically is, I think, the thing that holds it all together. It's the foundation where it all may begin, like a primer. Put a primer on the wall before you paint the wall. And it's supposed to help it seal better and look better and take out any of the cloudiness from the prior color that was there. So I like that. So educate also talks about it being something that one can be enlightened on, to elevate them up, to give them more ways of saying that they have been developed, and also to indoctrinate. We used to have, when I worked in Italy, I was one of the indoctrination specialists. So everyone came over to us, and I would be the person that told them everything about the base and the surrounding areas of Italy. And I was good at it. But the thing is that I had to educate myself so then I could educate them. So I wasn't giving them information that they didn't need to know. They needed to know that they needed a license to drive from the base that gave them an international license, driver's license. But then they also needed to know what areas to go into, what areas where they were looking, where there might be apartments that are available for rent, because most of the people where I lived in Sicily were attached to the base. They lived in the local townships. You know, they may live way up near Mount Etna, or they were all the way down, like we were in Moda Sant'Anastasi, which was the first little village after you left, you know, NAS 2 going over to 1. So it was beyond that, but still, nonetheless, it was available to us. And how we maneuvered it was that we needed to share information with all of the new folks coming in from other portions of other areas of the world. And it worked well, because they would always say, boy, I don't know how you do that so well. And I made it fun. Because sometimes when you add fun to education, people learn. They learn it, and they learn it well. My last letter in maneuver is rally. I believe rally is a great word, and it really is a word that goes well with maneuvering. This is as in demonstrations, a mass meeting to display support for a cause or a person. And sometimes we rally for the bad things, but a lot of times there's a rally for good things. You know, churches have rallies, businesses have rallies, you know, schools have rallies. So rally doesn't necessarily mean it's for the bad thing. It's not always demonstrating the ugly or the unwanted. Sometimes it's or what is being left out, or people that are being left out of. Sometimes it just talks about the opportunity for mobilization, looking at the convening of people coming together to discuss what they feel is important, the likeness of it. It may be a period of where there's marshaling, you know, and marshaling, when I first heard that word, it was always associated with, you know, unrest, but unrest in the negative sense, not a marshaling in the positive sense. But it is a calling up of people coming together to do whatever. And then, of course, I always remember this word when I started with the military, mustering. I said, what is mustering? Well, mustering is assemblage, where they all come together. They all come together. I tell you, I love doing what I'm doing, and I really take every opportunity. I don't take it lightly that, you know, on Monday, which is MLK Day, that I will be doing something. If any of you would like to work as a parade marshal, I'm going to do the 7 to 10 shift downtown. Let me know. I would love for you to come and work with me down there, and the others that will be showing up. Some will show up as Rotarians, and others will just show up, but we will be there to try to get the parades lined up. And I said, it's pretty big parade. So, you know, and I believe the parade starts at 11 o'clock on Monday. I'm hoping that the weather will be, you know, what I would call nice weather and not too cold, and that people will be able to enjoy the newness of the parade of that day. And our own Aaron Watson is the Grand Marshal for the parade. So I'm really looking for that. And it's all about, you know, serving, the concept of serving and doing it in excellence, you know. I hope to see you there. Listen, you all have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. Do what you do. And look, think about where you're maneuvering to or from. Okay. If you don't do anything else, I love it, love it, love it. If you would take this opportunity to say, are you stuck? That's Winnie. That's Winnie. I'm going to do nothing else but hit that share button and send it off so that others in my thread, my stream of people will know that there's somebody out there working just for them. I love you. I love you. I love you. Appreciate you, and pass it on. Have a good weekend and be safe. Thank you. Happy MLK Day.